I'd like to introduce Dave Buxton. Dave has come over from Sydney where he now works. Dave was third in the South Australian Home and Pigeon Association points last year, and we're at Warren March's loft at Jervois interviewing David. David, when did you first become interested in pigeon racing?
1966. My dad converted an old chook house, and I didn't know but discovered that he had had pigeons when he was a boy, and I was hooked from day one. So it's been on and off for 44 years. Mm. Yep.
What would have been your most memorable moment in pigeon racing, David?
You probably remember Major Rob Wilson used to put reports on the radio, and one year from Alice Springs some birds had a very strong north wind, and on the morning after the birds had been released, Rob was telling people about all these times of pigeons that had come, one before midnight and then several in the morning, and I'd actually had one at 6:10 in the morning. And so when he was describing these things to the people on the radio, I was thinking, I'm not going to tell anyone, but I reckon I'm in this. And my heart was beating, and I thought, this is fantastic. And many of the other experiences since have produced a similar sort of response, but that's the one I remember the most.
Are there any theories you have? Like, would it be wing theory, throat theory? Or are you a feet man, first feet on the landing board?
I'm always very excited about the first feet on the landing board. I do like particular characteristics in pigeons that I think are really important. One of them is just the total health package of a pigeon, and I think that's really important. Some of the pigeons I've had in the past had what I described as quite flat wings, and I didn't think they were particularly good for long distance flying, and so I've found that my better pigeons in recent years have had more of a curve in their wing, but there's lots of different things, and it would probably take me all day to describe all the subtle characteristics, but the overall health of the pigeon is absolutely paramount.
Do you practice any line breeding or inbreeding at all, Dave?
I've read all sorts of books on what line breeding is and what inbreeding is, and I mate relatives close together. I'm not afraid to do that, and I've found that some of those matings are more effective than others, but I can't say that uncle to niece is better than aunt to nephew, or half brother, half sister. I think half brother, half sister is quite a good mating. But if I've got a very good pigeon, I'll use that with multiple mates, and then I'll determine which ones of those young ones I'll go on with. So I couldn't say that I have a systematic plan that I stick to, and in 5 years' time I'll reach my ultimate goal, because I find for me that's an evolving thing, continually making adjustments as the improvements that I'm seeking emerge in the birds.
If you've got a pair that's producing winners, would you split them up and try with other birds?
I have done that in the past, and quite often I've gone back to the original mates, but I'm not afraid to mate good pigeons, good producing birds to other mates, and quite often then bring those young ones back together with the young ones off the original pair. So I can't say I've ever had a pair that's only ever been mated to each other. I'm always experimenting.
Do you think the wind influences the results of races?
I'm absolutely certain that that's the case. Adelaide's geography is rather interesting, having a range of hills that are some distance from the coast in the northern sector, and then towards the south tapers in. And we find that the predominant wind in our racing season has some westerly dimension in it, which tends to push the birds to the eastern side. So there are many days where we feel quite frustrated when we live in the southwestern part, but I'm always pleased when the wind is exactly on the nose because that tends to produce a more even result.
What were the origins of the bloodlines you keep, David?
I've had a mixture over the years. I've been very fortunate to have a friend in Bun Snyder's, and he and Noeline gifted me a particularly good pigeon in 1991, and that had some Goodger in it via Alan Theedy, but it had some other Australian bloodlines, and that particular pigeon mated to multiple different hens, produced winners, and so that bloodline's still running through the loft. I managed to get some Jansons from John Hoffman, and those pigeons have been very good, and in the last year I was very excited to have a half Janson finish fourth from Marla, 600 miles. So I'm gradually working out how to make them fly right through to the distance. So I've used a variety of pigeons, and that's meant that in different conditions, those particular, usually I'm competitive in most races because the different families I've got have managed to cope with the particular conditions that happen on the day.
You had a very good year in 2009. What do you put your success down to?
I went to a dinner in 2005, and I was seated between Max Taylor and John Doyle, which was a most fortuitous encounter, and John has helped me to take very seriously the health of pigeons, and I've been trying to be very observant and learn those things, and I think this last year the health of the loft was better than I've had it for a long time. I went to a deep litter system, and not only did that mean the loft was very dry and the birds were very happy, they were often nesting in the litter, but also it meant the time I normally would have used for cleaning, I was actually with the birds watching them rather than simply cleaning the loft. So I put down the health of the loft, and I would have to say I could see the improvement in my breeding as the years had gone on. Different things I've tried had meant that the birds improved, and then I was more careful with the way that I mated them up.
David, what do you mean by a deep litter system? What did you actually use?
Well, I guess technically it's not simply a bed of pigeon droppings. The loft where I was flying in the southern suburbs was a coastal loft. I've had Rob Marshall assess that as a loft that's vulnerable to high humidity, and so I've been very conscious of making sure that the loft was as dry as possible, and this last year I cleaned the loft out in April and then put down a bed of pine shavings, which upset the birds for about a week. They couldn't work out what all this stuff was, but then as I said earlier, they became quite happy. The droppings and the shavings mixed up together, and over the next 6 months I didn't have to do anything to it.
Do you think grit and minerals play a big part in the pigeon's diet?
Well, if you look at birds in the wild, they're always picking along roadsides and paddocks and everywhere else, and so where we've had opportunity to access a lot of these products, which are more readily available now, certainly the range of products is more diverse now. I've used them, and I know pigeons like the pink powder, some of the other grits they are very keen on, and particularly with breeding, calcium and other grits are very important. So I think that they're a quality product, and most pigeon flyers would be disappointed if they were not using them, particularly in regard to the quality of the